Picture the moment. You give your presence, your attention, your honesty, and suddenly he pulls away. His silence weighs heavier than 1,000 words. In that instant, your chest tightens, your mind begins to spin stories, and doubt creeps in like a shadow. What went wrong? What did I do? But here's what most don't realize. Inside that silence hides the greatest chance to shift the entire dynamic. His ignoring you is not simply absence, it's a mirror, an unconscious test. A quiet battlefield where emotional energy can transform into psychological power. Carl Jung taught that nothing within us happens by accident. What looks like rejection is often the key to reclaiming control. The real question isn't what he does, but how you choose to respond. When a man chooses silence, he isn't only distancing himself from you, he's running from himself. Ignoring is his defense, a fragile attempt to hold power, to avoid facing emotions he cannot manage. And while he believes he's in control, what he's truly showing is the exact place where he is weakest. It is inside this charged emptiness, this quiet tension, that your opportunity is born. Why his silence hurts more than words. Silence has a weight that no word can carry. When the man you care about suddenly withdraws, when his voice vanishes and the space between you becomes louder than any argument, the pain often strikes deeper than if he had shouted in anger. Words, even harsh ones, can be processed, debated, answered. Silence, however, leaves you with nothing to grasp, no point of contact, only a void that your mind rushes to fill. In those moments, the imagination takes control, thoughts spiral. Perhaps you did something wrong, perhaps his feelings have changed, perhaps he is already turning toward someone else. The absence of his voice becomes a stage on which your fears perform endlessly. And the strange part is that his silence is rarely neutral. It is charged, almost magnetic, drawing your attention with a force that feels impossible to resist. Psychology shows us that human beings fear uncertainty more than pain itself. A cut heals, a harsh word fades, but uncertainty lingers. When a man chooses not to speak, he leaves you in uncertainty. That uncertainty becomes heavier with each passing hour. You begin to replay past conversations, you analyze his tone, you recall his gestures. The silence does not sit still. It multiplies. Carl Jung observed that what we do not face in the outer world becomes amplified within the inner world. His silence is not just an absence of sound. It is a mirror reflecting your insecurities. Every unanswered question finds a home inside your chest, and every doubt echoes louder because no word comes to soften it. This is why silence hurts more than words, because it awakens the hidden fears already waiting inside. Yet there is another layer to this. Silence often feels like rejection, but in many cases it is more about him than about you. A married man especially carries many conflicts. His silence can be his shield, a way of avoiding what he is not ready to confront. But for you, receiving that silence feels like abandonment. The difference between his intention and your perception is what deepens the wound. Still, even in the sting of silence, something important is happening. You are being given the chance to recognize how much power you unconsciously hand over when words are withheld. Instead of staying centered, you may find yourself leaning forward, trying to close the gap, trying to pull answers from him that he is unwilling to give. This imbalance is what makes silence so dangerous, not because of what it is, but because of how you respond to it. The pain of being ignored lies not only in the absence of words, but also in the story you create about that absence. The human mind craves meaning. When none is provided, it invents one. So his silence becomes proof of rejection, or evidence of betrayal, or confirmation that your value has been dismissed. And once the mind chooses a meaning, the body reacts as though it were true. Anxiety rises, sleep becomes difficult, even physical energy drains away. But there is a hidden truth beneath this pain. If silence has the power to wound you, it also has the power to reveal you. It shows where you feel least secure, where your identity depends too heavily on his presence. This knowledge can be frightening, but it can also be liberating. Because once you see where the wound is, you also see where healing must begin. To understand why his silence hurts more than words is to realize that silence itself is not the enemy. It is your reaction to silence that holds the key. Instead of chasing answers in the dark, you can learn to stand still, to breathe, to recognize that his choice to withdraw says more about his inner struggles than about your worth. The silence becomes a mirror, not a prison. In the next step, we will look deeper into what truly drives a married man to ignore, not just the absence you feel, but the psychology behind his behavior, and how understanding it can shift the way you see both him and yourself. The hidden psychology behind a married man's ignoring. When a married man chooses to ignore, it is rarely an empty act. Behind that silence, there are layers of inner conflict, hidden fears, and unspoken struggles. To the outside world, it may appear as if he is simply pulling away or losing interest. But psychology reveals that ignoring often has little to do with you, and far more to do with the unresolved battles within him. Marriage places a man in a complex web of responsibilities and expectations. He is expected to be loyal, stable, and committed, but he is also human, carrying shadows and desires that may not align with the image he presents. Carl Jung described these hidden parts of the psyche as the shadow, the side we often deny, yet that shapes our behavior in profound ways. When he ignores you, what you are truly witnessing is his shadow at work. On the surface, ignoring feels like rejection, but underneath it may be an attempt to control emotions that feel too strong or too risky. By choosing silence, he believes he is protecting himself from exposure. He avoids words because words reveal truth. He avoids presence because presence deepens connection. For him, ignoring is a defense, a way of keeping his inner conflicts hidden. There is also guilt woven into this silence. A married man often carries an invisible weight, torn between loyalty to his commitments and attraction that pulls him in another direction. Instead of facing this contradiction, he retreats. His silence becomes a shield against his own conscience. He convinces himself that by ignoring, he is reducing temptation, but in truth, the act only magnifies the tension. For the woman on the other side, it feels deeply personal. You sense rejection, abandonment, and invisibility, but from the perspective of psychology, his silence is more about his inability to face himself than about your worth. He ignores not because you lack value, but because being near you awakens emotions he cannot neatly place inside his current life. His silence is an escape, but it is not an escape from you. It is an escape from himself. Another layer behind this behavior lies in the unconscious need for control. When he withdraws, he believes he is regaining power. He imagines that silence will create distance, that pulling away will restore order to his conflicted world. Yet, paradoxically, this silence often reveals his weakness rather than his strength. A man who truly feels secure does not need to hide. It is the fragile heart, not the strong one, that avoids the light. Carl Jung emphasized that what we suppress eventually demands expression. By ignoring you, the married man attempts to suppress emotions, but suppression only intensifies what lies beneath. His silence is not calm. It is heavy with unresolved energy. And the longer it lasts, the more it reveals. Silence shows not control, but avoidance. It shows not indifference, but the depth of what he struggles to admit. For you, recognizing this hidden psychology changes the entire meaning of being ignored. Instead of taking it as proof of rejection, you can begin to see it as a map of his inner conflicts. His silence points to the places where he feels most unstable, where desire and duty clash, where fear outweighs courage. This awareness frees you from carrying blame that is not yours to carry. It is also important to remember that ignoring can be an unconscious test. By pulling away, he may be watching how you respond. Will you chase? Will you beg for answers? Will you lose yourself in his absence? In truth, he may not even know he is testing, but the dynamic is real. His silence creates a stage where your reaction plays out, and in that stage lies your opportunity. Understanding the hidden psychology behind a married man's ignoring is not about excusing the behavior, but about seeing clearly what it truly is. It is not a declaration of your unworthiness. It is a reflection of his divided self, and once you see that, the power shifts. His silence no longer defines you. It exposes him. As we move forward, we will explore what happens next, how his act of ignoring, meant to protect his control, actually uncovers his deepest weakness. And more importantly, how you can use this knowledge to reclaim your own strength in the silence he leaves behind. If you want to go even deeper and truly understand the hidden patterns shaping your relationships, the Jung Method will guide you step by step. The link is pinned in the first comment. When he ignores you, he reveals his weakness. When a man chooses to ignore, it feels like he is the one holding all the power. He withholds his words, his attention, his affection, and you are left in a silence that feels like a cage. Yet the truth is very different from what it seems on the surface. Ignoring does not prove strength. It does not prove control. In fact, it is often the clearest sign of weakness. A man who is confident, secure, and in full control of himself does not need to hide. He does not fear emotions. He does not run from connection. Instead, he can face discomfort, speak openly, and carry responsibility for what he feels. Silence is not the tool of the strong. It is the shield of the fragile. By ignoring you, he is revealing not that you are unworthy, but that he is unprepared to meet you in truth. Carl Jung often explained that the parts of ourselves we fail to accept become projected into our behavior. When a married man ignores, he is not showing authority. He is showing the very place where he is divided inside. He avoids you because being near you forces him to see emotions he cannot control. He withholds presence because your presence awakens a side of him that clashes with the image of stability he tries to maintain in his marriage. His silence is not a wall of strength but a confession of inner conflict. For the woman on the other side, it is easy to confuse this silence with rejection. It feels personal, almost like punishment. But when you look deeper, you realize that ignoring is not about you. It is about him trying to escape his own fragility. By pulling away, he thinks he is keeping his life in order, but in truth, he is admitting that he cannot stand firm in the face of his own feelings. This weakness is revealed in the very act of avoidance. A strong man faces what he feels. A weak man hides. Silence becomes the evidence of his struggle, and the more he hides, the more he reveals. Each ignored message, each unanswered moment is proof that something inside him is unsettled. He believes he is controlling the situation, but his silence only uncovers how much control he has already lost. There is also fear behind his behavior. A married man may fear judgment, exposure, or the consequences of desire. Rather than confronting those fears with honesty, he chooses the path of least resistance: withdrawal. But fear disguised as silence does not disappear. It grows heavier with every moment of avoidance. His silence is not empty. It is filled with the echoes of the very emotions he refuses to face. And here lies the shift in perspective. When he ignores you, he is not closing a door. He is opening a window into his weakness. You can see the cracks in the armor he tries so hard to wear. You can recognize that what feels like rejection is actually confession. He is showing you the limits of his strength. He is showing you where he is most vulnerable. Once you see this truth, you no longer need to chase his attention. You no longer need to prove your value. His silence is already proof, not of your lack, but of his struggle. And in this recognition, the power begins to shift. Instead of being trapped in the cage of silence, you can step outside of it. You can allow his weakness to remain his without letting it define your worth. Carl Jung believed that the way we respond to the unconscious reveals who truly holds the power. When he ignores you, the temptation is to react with fear, to beg for attention, to mirror his weakness with your own. But when you respond with calm, with self-possession, with quiet strength, you turn the dynamic upside down. His silence no longer traps you. It exposes him. In the next step, we will explore how this silence, instead of being a prison, can actually become a test. A moment where your reaction decides whether the power remains in his hands or returns fully to yours. How silence becomes a test of your power. Silence is never just silence. When a married man ignores you, it may look like absence, but it carries the weight of something much deeper. His silence becomes a stage where your reaction is tested. It is not always intentional, but it always reveals something important. What you choose to do in that quiet space determines whether you give away your power or rise above the game. Carl Jung often taught that life places us in situations that expose our unconscious patterns. Silence is one of those situations. When you're ignored, you may feel an urgent pull to fix the gap. You want to explain, to reach out, to fill the emptiness with words, hoping that your voice will end the discomfort. But this reaction gives away what should never be surrendered: your inner stability. The test of silence is not about him. It is about you. A man's silence has the power to stir every hidden insecurity. It presses against the places where you doubt your worth. If you measure your value by his attention, then the moment he withholds it, you feel as though your value has disappeared. But that is the illusion of silence. The truth is that your value does not decrease when his words stop. Your worth is not dependent on his voice. The test is whether you will remember that when you feel forgotten. When a married man ignores, he may be struggling with his own divided emotions, his loyalty, or his guilt. But for you, the silence feels like a question. Will you collapse into doubt, or will you stand firm in self-trust? This is the hidden test that silence always brings. He may not be aware he is testing you, but the outcome is real. Your reaction teaches him how much power he truly has in your life. If you rush to chase him, you confirm his belief that ignoring gives him control. You show that silence manipulates you, that absence bends your strength. This may give him temporary satisfaction, but it also creates an imbalance that leaves you weaker. On the other hand, if you remain centered, if you allow the silence without losing your presence, you reveal something unexpected, that his silence has no hold over you. That revelation changes the entire dynamic. The test of silence is not passed by shouting, by pleading, or by forcing answers. It is passed by patience, by calm, by trust in yourself. When you resist the urge to chase, you show that your stability does not crumble under pressure. And paradoxically, this calm response often unsettles him more than your pursuit ever could. He expected control, but instead he sees a strength he cannot shake. Jung explained that the unconscious seeks balance. When he ignores, he is trying to create distance, but when you do not collapse, the balance shifts. His silence no longer weakens you. It begins to reveal his own fragility. He thought silence would protect him, but instead it exposes him. Your power becomes visible, not through force, but through restraint. Think of silence as a mirror. If you respond with desperation, it reflects your insecurity. If you respond with calm, it reflects your strength. This is why silence is always a test of power. It does not decide your worth, but it shows you how much you believe in it. And once you see that your value remains untouched, you realize that his silence cannot steal what was never his to own. The test is difficult because silence feels unnatural. We are taught to fill spaces, to explain, to fix. But in truth, the ability to remain still in the face of uncertainty is one of the greatest forms of strength. It is in that stillness that you discover a deeper confidence, one that cannot be shaken by the absence of another. When a married man ignores you, he is revealing his own inner conflicts. But when you hold steady in silence, you are revealing your power. And that power grows each time you refuse to let absence define you. In the next step, we will look at how this power can be transformed into attraction, how your calm response to silence can awaken desire in ways that chasing never could. The feminine response that turns ignoring into desire. When a married man ignores you, the first instinct is often to react. The silence burns, the unanswered messages feel like rejection, and the mind rushes to find relief. You want to explain, to demand answers, to break through the wall he has built. But the truth is that chasing only feeds his belief that he holds the power. The path to turning silence into desire is not reaction but transformation. It begins with the way you respond, not to him but to yourself. Carl Jung taught that what we resist persists. If you resist silence with fear, the fear grows stronger. If you resist with anger, the anger consumes you. But if you meet silence with calm, with presence, and with confidence, the silence itself begins to shift. What was once a weapon against you becomes a stage where your strength shines. The feminine response that awakens desire is rooted in steadiness. It is not about forcing him to speak, but about showing that his silence does not control you. When you remain grounded, you send a message without words, that your value is not diminished by his absence. This creates a powerful reversal. Instead of proving your worth to him, you reveal that his attention is not the measure of your identity. That reversal unsettles him. He expected your desperation, but instead he finds mystery. He expected your chase, but instead he feels your distance. And in that distance, attraction begins to stir. Desire grows in space, not in suffocation. When you rush to close the gap, you remove the air where longing breathes. But when you step back, when you allow the silence to exist without collapsing, you create the very tension that makes him restless. He begins to wonder what you are thinking, what you are feeling, why you are not begging for his voice. That curiosity born in silence becomes the seed of desire. The feminine response is not coldness. It is not pretending to care less than you do. It is the quiet strength of choosing yourself even when he does not choose you in the moment. It is the ability to keep your dignity while his silence tries to shake it. This response does not need loud declarations. It is shown in your patience, in your stillness, in your refusal to let his ignoring define your mood. That stability becomes magnetic. A married man often ignores because he feels overwhelmed by the emotions you awaken in him. He thinks silence gives him control, but when you do not chase, he feels something unexpected: loss. He realizes that the silence that was meant to protect him has only deepened his hunger. He thought ignoring would make you weaker, but instead it makes you more mysterious, more distant, and therefore more desirable. This is not about manipulation. It is about alignment. When you stop trying to force his attention, you realign with your own power. You become the one who chooses, not the one who waits. And in that shift, he feels the energy change. His silence no longer proves his dominance. It proves your independence. And independence has always been one of the most irresistible forms of attraction. Jung reminded us that desire is rooted in projection. What he cannot find in himself, he seeks in another. When you respond to silence with strength, you project what he lacks: balance, calm, self-possession. That projection pulls him back toward you, not because you demanded it, but because he cannot ignore what he feels drawn to. His silence, once a tool to create distance, becomes the very space that pulls him closer. Turning ignoring into desire requires patience, but more than that, it requires trust. Trust that your worth is not tied to his actions. Trust that silence is not the end, but a moment of revelation. Trust that by choosing not to chase, you create the conditions for attraction to grow. The feminine response is not about giving more, but about being more grounded, more centered, more aware of your own strength. When you embrace this response, the silence that once felt like punishment becomes an opportunity. You discover that the most powerful words are the ones you do not speak, and the most powerful action is the one you choose not to take. By standing firm in yourself, you turn his ignoring into curiosity, his distance into longing, and his silence into the sound of desire being born. In the next step, we will uncover why chasing backfires, and why the very effort to force connection only destroys the attraction you are meant to awaken. Why chasing him backfires, and what to do instead. The natural impulse when a married man ignores you is to chase. The silence feels unbearable, so you reach out again. You ask questions. You try to break the wall he has built. In the moment, it feels like the only way to relieve the tension. But chasing is the one action that always backfires. Instead of drawing him closer, it pushes him further away. Instead of restoring your power, it confirms that you have given it to him. Understanding why this happens is the first step to changing the entire dynamic. Carl Jung explained that the unconscious seeks balance. When one person leans too far in, the other leans back. This is why chasing creates the opposite effect of what you desire. The more you pursue, the more he withdraws. The harder you push for answers, the more he hides. It is not because you lack value, but because your actions signal to him that you have placed all of your worth in his hands. That pressure makes him retreat even further. Chasing also removes mystery, which is one of the strongest forces in attraction. When you constantly call, text, or demand attention, you reveal everything. He no longer wonders about your feelings, your thoughts, or your boundaries. You have handed him the complete picture, and with that, the tension vanishes. Without tension, desire fades. What you believed would create closeness actually erases the very space where attraction lives. Another reason chasing backfires is that it flips the natural rhythm of energy. In healthy dynamics, interest flows in both directions. But when you chase, the flow becomes one-sided. You give, he takes. You explain, he remains silent. This imbalance may temporarily make him feel in control, but it also makes him lose respect. Not because you are unworthy, but because your actions show that you are willing to abandon yourself just to keep his presence. Respect cannot survive where self-abandonment exists. So what can you do instead? The answer is simple but powerful. Step back. Create space. Allow silence to exist without letting it dominate you. When you resist the urge to chase, you send a silent message that echoes louder than any word. I do not need to beg for what is mine to deserve. That calm withdrawal restores the balance. He begins to lean forward because you are no longer leaning all the way in. This does not mean you must play games. It does not mean pretending you do not care. It means embodying self-respect in action. It means remembering that your value does not shrink when he ignores you. By holding your ground, you protect your energy and shift the dynamic. Instead of proving your worth to him, you allow him to feel the absence of your presence. And absence is often the greatest reminder of value. Jung also taught that projection plays a central role in relationships. When you chase, you project your fear of being abandoned. He sees that fear and responds by pulling back further. But when you step back, you project strength. He sees stability, calm, and confidence, kind qualities he may not find in himself. That projection draws him in, not because you chased, but because you stopped. Doing nothing may feel uncomfortable at first. It goes against every impulse. But silence, when met with calm, becomes your ally. Instead of collapsing under his withdrawal, you turn it into an opportunity to grow stronger. You learn to manage the uncertainty without losing yourself. And in doing so, you awaken a magnetism that chasing could never create. The irony is that when you stop chasing, he often begins to chase you. He senses the shift, he feels the distance, and he wonders why you no longer seek him. Curiosity awakens. Desire returns. He begins to reach for the connection he once resisted. What was once silence becomes pursuit. What was once weakness becomes longing. The secret is that you do not need to run after anyone to hold their attention. By holding your own ground, by refusing to collapse in the face of being ignored, you create the conditions for true attraction. Chasing is noise, presence is power, and power is what he cannot ignore for long. In the next step, we will explore how Jung's teachings reveal the deeper key, how to turn rejection itself into control, and how to transform what once felt like loss into the foundation of your strength. The Jungian key, transforming rejection into control. Rejection is one of the deepest human fears. When a married man ignores you, it feels like rejection in its purest form. The silence becomes proof that you are not wanted, not valued, not chosen. Yet Carl Jung's teachings invite us to see rejection differently. He believed that what we experience outside is often a mirror of what lives inside us. In this way, rejection is not an ending, but an invitation. It shows where you have given away your control and where you have the chance to reclaim it. The first step in transforming rejection into control is to separate his actions from your identity. When he ignores you, the pain comes not only from his silence, but from the meaning you attach to it. You tell yourself that his withdrawal means you are not enough. But the truth is that his silence speaks about him, not you. He is managing his own conflicts, his own fears, his own guilt. By detaching your value from his behavior, you begin to take the first piece of control back. Jung explained that we are shaped by archetypes, patterns of energy that live in the unconscious. One of the most powerful archetypes for a woman is the sovereign, the part of you that knows your worth and does not need validation. When you feel rejected, this archetype seems hidden, but rejection is exactly the moment when the sovereign must rise. Instead of collapsing into insecurity, you stand in your dignity. Instead of proving your worth, you embody it. This shift turns rejection into an awakening of power. Another way rejection can be transformed is through perspective. What feels like rejection may actually be protection. His silence, painful as it is, reveals truths you need to see. It shows you his instability, his inability to meet you in honesty. By ignoring you, he unconsciously admits where he is unprepared to stand beside you. What looks like a closed door is actually guidance. It directs you away from weakness and toward your own strength. Seeing this gives you control because you are no longer begging for something that was never solid. There is also the matter of projection. Jung observed that what we deny in ourselves, we often seek in others. When you feel rejected, the temptation is to run toward the one who withdraws, to seek their approval to fill your void. But this only deepens the wound. The key is to reverse the projection. Instead of seeking acceptance outside, you offer it to yourself. You say, even if he turns away, I remain whole. Even if he ignores me, I still belong to myself. This inner declaration shifts the entire dynamic. Control does not mean forcing him to respond. It does not mean winning his attention through games or pressure. Control means remembering where your true power lives. It is the ability to hold your center no matter what he does. It is the choice to respond with calm instead of desperation. It is the decision to stand in self-respect when silence tries to steal it away. This kind of control is quiet, but it is unshakable. When you embody this, something remarkable happens. The rejection that once weakened you becomes the very soil where confidence grows. His silence no longer makes you small. It makes you stronger. His ignoring no longer proves your unworthiness. It proves his fragility. And as you stand taller, the energy shifts. He begins to feel what he thought he avoided, the pull of your presence. Attraction returns not because you chased it, but because you stopped giving your power away. Jung believed that life will repeat its lessons until we learn them. If you collapse each time you feel rejection, the cycle continues. But the moment you transform rejection into control, the pattern ends. You no longer fear silence because you know it cannot take away your worth. You no longer fear distance because you know your power does not live in his hands. That realization is freedom. Rejection hurts because it feels like the loss of love. But in truth, rejection can become the beginning of self-love. It can become the moment you step into strength you did not know you had. And once you taste that strength, no silence can ever control you again. In the next step, We will bring everything together by showing how this transformation prepares you for the final shift, the moment where insecurity dies and unshakable confidence is born. Your final shift. From insecure to unshakable, there comes a moment when the silence, the rejection, and the confusion no longer hold the same power they once did. That moment is the turning point, the shift from insecurity to strength, from doubt to clarity, from weakness to unshakable presence. When a married man ignores you, the natural response is to feel small, to question yourself, to surrender your peace to his absence. But what if that absence was the very space designed to awaken your strongest self? This is the final lesson hidden in the experience. You are not defined by how he treats you. You are defined by how you choose to treat yourself. Insecurity grows when your worth depends on someone else's attention. If his silence makes you collapse, it shows you that you have handed too much of your identity into his hands. But the silence is also an opportunity. It invites you to find value that does not vanish when someone turns away. It teaches you to stand tall even in the face of distance. This is the birth of unshakable confidence. The moment you realize that no one has the power to decide your worth unless you give it to them. Carl Jung spoke often about individuation, the process of becoming whole within yourself. This process is not comfortable. It requires facing rejection, abandonment in the dark corners of insecurity. But through that discomfort, something greater emerges, a self that no longer bends with every change of wind. When a man ignores you, he unconsciously hands you the stage to practice individuation. He forces you to see where you lean too heavily on others, and where you must begin to lean on yourself. That is the gift hidden beneath the pain. The shift begins with awareness. You notice the thoughts that rush in when silence appears. You see the stories your mind writes, stories of not being good enough, of being forgotten, of being replaced. And in that noticing, you gain choice. Instead of believing the stories, you begin to question them. You realize that his silence is not proof of your lack. It is only proof of his inner struggle. That realization weakens the hold insecurity has on you. Then comes the practice of stillness. Instead of rushing to chase, you allow the space. You breathe into the discomfort. You remind yourself that your presence has value whether or not he acknowledges it. Each time you refuse to collapse into desperation, you strengthen the muscle of self-trust. Over time, this muscle becomes so strong that silence no longer shakes you. What once felt like rejection now feels like clarity. You can see his actions for what they are, reflections of him, not of you. This transformation does not happen in a single moment. It builds through choices. Each time you choose dignity over chasing, calm over panic, patience over pleading, you rewrite the pattern. The woman who once lost herself in insecurity becomes the woman who cannot be moved. She no longer waits for validation because she carries it within. She no longer fears silence because she has learned to hear her own voice louder than anyone else's. And the effect of this shift extends beyond him. The world begins to feel different when you no longer fear rejection. People sense your strength. They respect your presence. Desire grows naturally around someone who is steady, because steadiness is rare and magnetic. Even the married man who once believed he had control will feel the pull of this transformation. What once pushed you into chasing now pulls him into pursuit. Jung reminded us that the soul always seeks wholeness. The silence you feared was not meant to destroy you, but to reveal you. The rejection you felt was not proof of weakness, but a path to strength. And the insecurity that once defined you was never meant to stay. It was only the soil from which confidence could grow. Now you stand at the end of the lesson. You are no longer the woman who breaks when ignored. You are the woman who grows stronger in silence. You are no longer the one who doubts her worth. You are the one who carries it unshakably. The final shift is not about him at all. It is about you. About the discovery that your greatest power was never in his hands, but always in your own. And as you leave this chapter, remember, the silence was never empty. It was speaking to you all along, whispering the truth that you are stronger than you knew, and that nothing can take that strength away again.